Well, good morning, everyone. We are ready to kick off our keynotes this morning. I wanted to take a minute and say, we know there's some rough spots with the platform. We've got everybody working on clearing those up. I think that we're going to have that resolved before too long. But the good news is that all of the content is going to be available throughout the week in the Summit app, along with all of the discussions that are still going to be happening. So, you won't have missed anything. It'll all still be in there, which I think is going to be great.
Yeah, I think we will, like as Jonathan said, all the content will be on demand and available to stream at any time, once we're up there. And we just want to say thank you to everyone in the community, such a supportive community. I think we've all been there before with a technical glitch in real time. But
technical difficulties.
Yeah, but just really appreciate everybody's understanding and patience. And we do have some really incredible speakers. And I think that you're going to be excited to hear from all of them. And we'll be kicking that off here in a moment. Anything else?
Yeah, we've got a great lineup that we're about to dive into with the keynotes here. I'm really excited about the news and the speakers and the different use cases that we're going to hear about. And the other thing that I would say is we'll post notices when the login issues are all resolved and the app is back to full speed. Definitely get back in there because there's a ton of places to interact. I actually really like the virtual marketplace that we put together. And so, definitely get there, check out the sponsors. And thank you, especially to our headline sponsors, Canonical, Huawei, and VexHost. The whole platform is built around kind of taking our community style of event and bringing it into the virtual world. And it's also all open source too, which is cool. But like I said, a few rough spots on the launch this morning, but I think we're going to get those worked out, and the rest of the show is going to be great.
Yeah, and I think we're going to hear from Mark Shuttleworth in just a little bit, and then I believe tomorrow Mohammed Nazar is going to be joining us from VexHost. So amazing speakers, a lot of others that I'm sure you're looking forward to. So let's start the show, shall we?
Welcome to the Open Infrastructure Summit. The show is about to begin. Please find your seat and get comfy. Turn your phone upside down. Silence your Slack. Join the chat and say hello. Put on your best conference clothes. The next summit starts in... Let's start the show.
Open Infrastructure.
Soy co-reviewer del proyecto OpenStack Manila.
I work with the OpenStack Scientific SIG, who are a great bunch of people brought together with a common purpose of using open infrastructure for scientific and research computing.
저는 오픈스택 기반의 퍼블릭 클라우드를 운영하고 있습니다.
Kompanią Centrum Innowacyjne jest organizatorem corocznych konferencji OpenInfra Days Poland i przede wszystkim centrum szkoleniowym dostarczającym szkolenia z wielu obszarów open source, Linux, OpenStack, Kubernetes.
Я ключовий рецензент проекту OpenStack Ansible та приймаю активну участь у житті інших проєктів OpenInfra.
I am OpenInfra.
Mariel är OpenInfra.
我是 OpenInfra.
Jag är OpenInfra.
We are OpenInfra.
What a cool video. What an awesome start.
That was amazing. So many familiar faces. We miss all of you so much. We could be here, in person.
Yeah, so I'm Jonathan Bryce.
I'm Mark Collier, and we're going to be your hosts here for the first ever virtual Open Infrastructure Summit.
Yeah, so welcome everyone. The plan for this week originally was to be in Berlin in person, and obviously that's not what we can do this year, but I'm really excited because we've got a great lineup. All of you have submitted so much awesome content. We're coming here together in this virtual format, and I think that it's just going to be a great week.
Yeah, I mean, it's incredible. We actually have the largest summit we've ever had in the history of summits, and we have people from more countries. So it's the most diverse summit we've ever had. We have people from over 120 countries. So we want to hear from all of you. We saw a few awesome videos to kick things off, but if you want to record a We Are OpenInfra video of your own, we'd love to see you do that. Put it on social media, use the hashtag WeAreOpenInfra, or drop an email to us with your video. We want to see as many of your faces as we can, so please jump in and send us your videos.
Yeah, so you mentioned it was the biggest summit ever, and this is the 10th anniversary of OpenStack. We just had the 22nd OpenStack release. And this year we've been thinking, really how did all of this get started? And if we go back to the beginning, how this started was about an idea. This all started with an idea that there should be open source infrastructure as a service software as we enter this period of time where more than ever we all depend on digital infrastructure for the things that are important in our lives. And that is a thing that I think at the time was a big idea, but we had a very small group that was starting that out. We had about 25 people that really formed up what started back then, and it was about 20,000 lines of code, so almost no software at all. And over time, we had hundreds of community members who joined in, and then it was thousands and then tens of thousands. And together, what we all did is we added more capabilities into more OpenStack projects. And then across the open source ecosystem, we saw projects like Cloud Foundry that started up. We saw Ceph, Open vSwitch. Now we have Kubernetes. And this whole idea of open source infrastructure has become more relevant than ever today.
And what's incredible when you think about what's happening right now, there's just more and more being created. I mean, I wouldn't be surprised if this week we see new ideas turn into new communities and start writing new software. And we really believe in creating communities that write software to run in production. And one of the things that we're so excited about is some of the new companies that are actually getting involved right now. In fact, just in the past week, our board of directors met and we had 4 new companies that applied to become platinum members and were accepted at that board meeting for next year. And that's never happened before in a single year, let alone in a single board meeting. And that's just incredible. We had companies like Ant Group, who has the Alipay platform, which is we'll be hearing more about later today from one of their engineers. We had Facebook Connectivity, we had FiberHome, and Wind River. So that really puts us on an amazing course. And these are the companies that believe in this community-led, open source community building software approach.
So, like Mark said, now we have new communities, we have new companies, we have new technologies, and I think that this is a really exciting time. And one of the things that we are super happy to be able to announce today is that we are announcing the Open Infrastructure Foundation as the successor to the OpenStack Foundation. Cheers!
Cheers!
Yeah.
Kampai!
Yeah, I mean, this is exciting. This is really great news, and it's something that I think represents where we have gotten to as our community.
Yeah,
and
we are OpenInfra.
Yeah,
it's official now.
And so we would love to have done this in Berlin and be able to cheers all together. But we can still do that. We want you to share selfies. Raise a glass of beer or coffee or whatever it is you want to toast us with. And as a community, let's all toast each other and celebrate this together.
And put it on social media and include that hashtag WeAreOpenInfra. Never forget your hashtags, Jonathan.
I know. I'm not the social media maven you are.
Well.
So we keep saying open infrastructure.
Yeah.
What do we mean by open infrastructure?
Good question. So, listen, open infrastructure, the simplest phrase to describe it, or the simplest definition is infrastructure built with open source software. But that's a noun kind of definition. That's kind of boring. I think it's much more exciting to think about real users doing real things, action, and putting this into action, putting it into the market. So we're thinking about things like infrastructure for AI, infrastructure for container native apps, infrastructure for edge computing, infrastructure for all these different use cases, fintech. So the list goes on, and we have so many of those users here this week. Many of them are speaking. So when we talk about autonomous driving, we have Volvo. They're going to talk about how they're using Zool. That's a perfect example. We have users like Verizon who are using Starling X. We're going to be hearing from people that are using Magma to connect the next billion people in the world. So when you think about open infrastructure, don't just think about that boring noun phrase. Think about how we're really building communities to write software to run in production. And that, my friend, is open infrastructure?
So, we've got a lot of awesome content that you highlighted. Many of those sessions are going to be featured in the keynotes, but also throughout the week. A lot of engineers who are here who are going to be talking about their deployments, giving details of how they are doing this in the real world. So this week's going to be great. We've got a discussion box beside every video. You can participate there. And this morning, we want you to drop any questions you have in there. We're going to be answering those live as we get through our speakers, and we'll be bringing some of them on to interact and answer those questions. So lots of ways to participate this week.
Yeah, and when it comes to participation, we want to give you every opportunity to join and help us build the next decade of open infrastructure together. So if you go to openinfra.dev/join, you can find out how to join the different communities, how to join the foundation, how to dig into the software and how to deploy it. So a lot of different ways to get involved, and that URL will send you down the right path.
Yeah, that next decade of open infrastructure is going to be whatever we decide as a community to make it. So this is a great place to get involved, and really, this is just a starting point. It's really up to you in terms of where this goes and what happens from here.
All right, so next up, I'm really excited to introduce you to someone who's been helping us think about this from the community, somebody who really understands foundations and the role of individuals and companies and how it all fits together, helped us think through this evolution to this announcement today of the Open Infrastructure Foundation, somebody from our community who we really are lucky to have, and that is Allison Randall.
Thanks, Mark and Jonathan. I'm Allison Randall. So there's a science to open source, a set of principles and practices that make it work well. Like most things about open source, these aren't deep, dark proprietary secrets. They're freely available for anyone to use, but not everyone chooses to use them. The mechanics of community play a big part in making open source work. Sometimes when people say community, it seems like they have a picture in their mind of some mystical others who magically make things happen. But open source works best when we see community as an inclusive whole of everyone engaged in it. Community is a group of individuals who care enough about open source to spend their time on it as volunteers or as part of their job. A foundation is a group of people who care enough about open source to make it their full-time job. They're part of the community. A company is also a group of people who care enough about open source to use it, share it with their customers, and participate in building it. They're part of the community. The mechanics of community work best when they're balanced, like three legs of a stool supporting and sustaining open source projects. Sometimes you'll see this balance get skewed, with people thinking the foundation has to own the project or the company has to control the project. A project can get by like that, but when the mechanics are out of balance, it always interferes, slows things down, and really holds them back from achieving their full potential. So that's one key principle. We're all in this together, working as equals to make our open source projects successful. Drilling down a little more specifically, there's a kind of table of elements of open source. You might recognize these from the project confirmation guidelines we use in evaluating pilot projects as they graduate, but they apply to any open source project. One element is a strategic mindset. That is, understanding where we've come from, understanding where we are, understanding where we want to go, and planning how to get there. Strategic work is a continuous process because where you are and where you're going changes, so your plans have to evolve too. Another element is a thoughtful approach to the structures we put in place to support and sustain projects. Governance models exist to meet the needs of the project, so in a healthy balance, they'll change over time as the project's needs change. Another element is technical best practices. That is, taking the time to care about things like documentation, code review, testing, bug handling, and security considerations. It's not rocket science, it's just good engineering. Another element is open collaboration. I could talk for hours about this, but at the simplest level, it's really about being a good neighbor to everyone in your community and to other communities. One good source to look at for how this works well is the philosophy of the four opens: open source, open development, open design, and open community. The last element I'll talk about is active engagement. This is about making sure there are a variety of voices involved in a project, that they're all heard, and ultimately that the project meets a real need for real users. Now, it might sound like the combination of these principles is a prescriptive one right way to do open source, but it isn't. The beauty of understanding the principles is that you realize there's an enormous amount of room for projects to do things differently while still respecting the principles. Now, that logo is not a warped open source logo. It's the symbol of the Vulcan philosophy of infinite diversity and infinite combinations. The idea is that welcoming many different ways of doing things makes us stronger. Some projects will go through the process of being pilot projects and confirmed projects at this foundation. Some open infrastructure projects are hosted by other foundations, and they're welcome here. Some open infrastructure projects may never seek affiliation with any foundation. They might only need one or two of the services a foundation can provide, or might simply benefit from collaborating beyond their own community in the broader open infrastructure community. That's okay too. They are welcome here. Everything I just said really boils down to one simple but important idea. Open source works better when you do it together. Back to you, Mark and Jonathan.
Thank you, Allison. That was such a great talk you gave there, and I especially love the message, which is you are welcome. You know, everyone in all of these communities, however you're participating, you are welcome. That is just, it's awesome. This is why we keep talking about join and participation. That is how all of these open infrastructure projects move forward, become better, become more useful. So, definitely join us, and thank you, Allison, for that. Did anything stand out to you, Mark?
I'd have to say probably the Vulcan philosophy. I mean, that's talking about being inclusive. So even if you're Vulcan, you're welcome to join. So, everybody's welcome. I love that.
Yes. Well, that was great. That was a great way to start. And now we have another awesome talk, which is going to be covering the importance of connectivity. When we talk about fundamental infrastructure that everyone needs access to, I think network connectivity is really an obvious example of that. And so let's welcome Amar Padmanabhan.
Hi, everybody. My name is Amar Padmanabhan. I'm an engineer at Facebook. Today, I'm going to offer some insights into the state of connectivity and how it can be a driver for the next decade of open software at the foundation. To kick it off, let's start with some good news. Global access to the internet is improving. 51% of individuals are now connected to the internet, and 4G coverage is projected to improve from 33% to 60% by 2022. This is amazing and really important. Access to reliable connectivity has become critically important for the livelihood of people across the globe. Research shows how important the internet is to improve people's livelihoods. 77% of people use the internet to learn job-related skills. 74% of people use the internet to discover new job opportunities, and 60% of people use the internet to pursue an education. It's like YouTube videos, anyone. So the internet is so much more than a luxury. It is a basic need. But there is always a but. We're starting to see a problem. While access to the internet and 4G speeds continues to improve, the speed of these networks is forecast to decline in developing and emerging markets, roughly 3/4 of the world's population. This is unfortunately going to create a new kind of digital divide, where some part of the population is having differentiated rich content with augmented reality experiences, and others will not. Obviously, this isn't good for the mobile ecosystem, but more importantly, this also has massive economic implications for people in developing and emerging markets. If we dive deeper into why network performance is going down, it's pretty simple to see the economics. We have three forces at work that are making it hard for the operators. First, data consumption is skyrocketing. In some emerging markets, we are seeing usage of 1 gigabyte per day. The internet is the main source of entertainment and information in these markets. Second, the average revenue per user, ARPU, is declining. So while networks are getting loaded and people are consuming more bandwidth, mobile operators are making less money per user. And finally, unless operators change the way networks are managed, OpEx will stay relatively flat. It's not hard to understand that these factors combined, operators are going to struggle to invest in network capacity sufficient to keep up with demand. Thus, there is a need to rethink the way we build and offer connectivity solutions. As we rethink how networks should be built, we realize that there is significant vision alignment between the OIF and Magma community around connectivity. Connectivity is this phenomenal mandate to take on as a community of people who care about the impact of technology on every human. This is also why I'm personally so excited about this collaboration. Over the last year, we have been working with the OIF community in moving Magma from a Facebook incubated project to more of a community-led software development project. Without further ado, what is Magma? A good way to think about it is to start by thinking about the problem statement around the network. A network in rural Brazil looks the same as a network in downtown San Francisco, a one-size-fits-all model. The problem, though, of connecting the next billion users to a higher quality internet is a problem of heterogeneity. Heterogeneity in access technology, Wi-Fi, 5G, LTE, depending on how the user is accessing the internet. Heterogeneity in scale, is it a 2-site deployment in the Amazon jungle or a 200-site deployment in a peri-urban area? And heterogeneity in a business model. So a solution that addresses this need needs to allow for all access technologies, LTE, Wi-Fi, and 5G, support scale-out architectures that were popularized by web-scale companies for different size of deployments, and allow for customization through permissive licenses and extensible APIs to enable new and novel business cases. Tying all of this together into something concrete, Release 1.3 is available now and supports fixed wireless, carrier Wi-Fi, and private LTE use cases. There is a Magma 101 talk on Tuesday that will cover all of this in greater detail. Looking forward to collaborating with everyone on the next decade of open connectivity software, starting with Magma. Thank you.
Thank you, Amar. I really appreciate that you came and talked not just about technology for technology's sake, but shedding a light on this growing digital divide. I mean, this is work that really matters. The fact that we're connecting people, and that means connecting them to economic opportunity. I think it really does matter, and it's great to also learn about Magma, the project. And in fact, we're going to be hearing from another user later on this morning talking about Magma. And then tomorrow, I hear there might even be another user, a blast from the past from other summits. And they may even bring a goat. I'm not sure. But before we go too far down that path, why don't we welcome Allison Price.
Thanks, Mark. I'm excited to be here, although I do want to hear about that goat later.
Oh, all right. Well, we might get to that. But first, you're going to tell us about the Superuser Awards.
I am. So for the last 6 years, we've been recognizing superusers. Now, these are organizations who not only run open infrastructure in production, but then they also contribute back to those open source projects that they rely on. This year, we got 8 incredible nominations that our editorial advisors reviewed, and tomorrow at the end of the keynotes, we'll be revealing the winner. But before that, we're going to show all 8 nomination videos between today and tomorrow's keynotes, and the first Superuser Awards nominee is Line.
Hello, we are platform teams in Line. We are happy to show our open infrastructure related activity here. First of all, Line serves messaging services, payments, travel, delivery, games, and so on. These services are built on top of our open infrastructure. This is the number of Line's open infrastructure. Line has 180 million monthly active users all over the world. And to accommodate the workload for these users, we have 2,400 hypervisors across 4 regions. 67,000 virtual machines are running. Separately from virtual machine, we also have 50,000 bare metal servers. We also have 350 Kubernetes clusters and amount of Kubernetes cluster nodes is 54,000 nodes, which run on our open infrastructure. And our self-storage is 17 petabytes across 3 regions. Our open infrastructure is quite huge. So we basically feedback problems and its solutions we hit in large-scale deployment. This feedback is varied from code level to knowledge level. And also, we started Oslo Metrics project in OpenStack Oslo community, which is really useful to visualize OpenStack internal workload. Thank you.
Wow, you know, Jonathan, I love these users that are operating at scale with open source. Line's a great example, and I just want to say congratulations on your nomination for the Superuser Awards.
Yeah, we'll have more of those videos throughout today and tomorrow morning. Lots of nominees, great stories. But up next, we have someone who has been a real leader in the open infrastructure community for years now, and she's going to talk about how you can get involved and the importance of mentorship. So let's welcome Victoria Martinez de la Cruz.
Hello everybody, I am Victoria. I'm a software engineer based in Buenos Aires, Argentina. The picture you see on the screen, that is from my very first OpenStack Summit back in 2013 at Portland, Oregon. I am the one on the left. And the one on the right, that's Julie, my enriching mentor. Julie played a key role in helping me become a successful open source contributor. She taught me everything that I had to know about tools, processes, how to communicate effectively with the community, and how to participate in these kind of events. So today I want to share with you some of that learning and give you a few tips so you have a great summit experience. The first thing that you're going to see probably is the huge selection of sessions that you have available. You're going to see that you have loads of customer cases, hands-on workshops, interesting panels, code deep dives, and even the upstream training if you're interested on contributing back to the OpenStack and the OpenDev communities. Let me make a quick pause here and give you a piece of advice. I remember when I started attending the summits that I tried to make my time count. I would try to attend all the sessions that I could. Let me tell you, that's a really bad idea. Instead, try to make a good selection of all those sessions that you really want to engage with and make this list in advance. So you make sure that you don't miss any of those. In case you miss a session that you wanted to attend anyways, don't worry too much about it because you are going to have all the recordings available after the summit finishes. Another very important part of the event is the forum. And I love this part. I love it because you actually get the chance to talk with operators, developers, customers, users, and other contributors for the different OpenInfra projects. This is a great place for you to learn, but also to speak up. And this is very important. We really want everybody to speak up. Maybe is your idea the one that is going to cause a huge impact on the project roadmap. So please speak up. And if you're afraid of doing so because of a language barrier or something like that, please don't worry too much about that. We are a global community. And as such, we are used to talk with people from different countries, with different backgrounds, in which maybe English is not the first language. For instance, check out the picture you have on the screen. That is from our last OpenInfra Summit in Shanghai. It was for the Manila Forum. We set up a board and we started drafting some ideas we had for development we were working at the time. And since not everybody of us could speak English fluently, we started making notes on every single idea that we have in there. So if we couldn't understand each other on the first try, we will take those notes and we will pass them through a software translator. So we made sure that everybody in the room was on the same page. So if something come up like this, don't worry too much. We will find a way. Just reach somebody on the community and we will make sure that everybody has the same chance to participate from the discussions that are taking place at the forum. So if this is the first time you're attending these kind of events and by the end of it, you fell in love with the community and you want to continue to be engaged, let me tell you, opportunities are open. If you're giving your first steps and you're looking for an internship, let me tell you a bit about 2 internship programs that we usually have in the community. One is Orichi, the other is Google Summer of Code. They are very similar on the fact that they are both paid internships, and in both you are going to be paired with a mentor that is going to help you work on a specific technical task you pick for a project. I'm a former ORG intern, and let me tell you, it's a great experience, and you don't want to miss it. Basically, you're going to be working on real work problems. You're going to be working with the best engineers around, so definitely it's something that you really want to do. If you want to know more details or you want to know about next opportunities, let us know and we will get back to you. If an internship is not what you're looking for, check out the job board that the OpenStack Foundation, the OpenInfra Foundation keeps updated for you. At the job board, you are going to see that you have a lot of openings, usually for contributing companies that try to look for talent within the community. So you never know. You check out the board, maybe your next career goal is in there. It's worth taking a look at it. With that, I want to say thank you very much for your attention, and I hope you have a wonderful summit experience.
The next Superuser Awards nominee is Trendyol Tech, the largest e-commerce company in Turkey, who's expecting to grow their footprint to 50,000 compute cores by the end of this year.
Well, congratulations to Trendyol Tech. And thank you so much to Victoria for sharing that inspiring journey on how people can get involved. And I hope others are just as inspired and follow in your footsteps.
Yes, and up next we actually have someone who's been part of this entire OpenStack journey with us. He's given a lot of really interesting keynotes at previous summits. And so from our first headline sponsor, Canonical, we want to welcome the CEO and founder, Mark Shuttleworth.
Well, what an amazing year, what an extraordinary year this has been. I really do miss the excitement of an OpenInfra summit in person. But on the other hand, it's quite nice to be speaking to you today from my office, which, as I'm sure it is for many of you, is also my dining room. So what I wanted to talk about this morning was OpenStack operations. Because the key thing to get right with OpenStack is the operations, not just deployment, but also upgrades, expansions, integration, evolution. A successful cloud will live a long time and will need to grow and evolve during that time. And I speak to you with a perspective now from Canonical of having delivered hundreds of different OpenStack clouds to different customers. Building OpenStack clouds for customers is a key focus for us. And of course, every customer has their unique requirements. So this gives us quite a unique perspective on successfully operating OpenStack. Now, of those clouds today, right now, 58 are fully managed by Canonical. And avoiding operations altogether is the easiest way for you to assess the value proposition of OpenStack and make sure that you're able to integrate with it and get the most value out of it. But the thing that I'm most proud of is that over the past couple of years, 25 of the clouds that we have been fully managing have been transferred into customer hands. It's really important to me and to us that customers take full control of their own clouds and start to build more OpenStack themselves. Giving people the confidence to do this is the key, and giving them the tools to do this is the key. It's not just about deploying OpenStack and living with an OpenStack. It's about running an OpenStack which is in under heavy utilization and doing all those things that people say are difficult. Now, for us, the secret sauce in this case isn't a secret. It's right there in the upstream OpenStack repositories. And that is a portfolio of reusable operations code packages. So this is charmed OpenStack. Each of those pictures represents, each of those icons represents a package of operations code. And every single deployment that we do, even if they have different architectures on different kinds of hardware with different goals and are in some cases choosing different components at different scales, every single one of them reuses the same packages of operations code. And they get updates to that ops code whenever something is fixed for anybody who shares that same body of code. Now, charms are packages of operations code. Now, the engine behind that is something called Juju. And Juju is not a configuration management system. If I look back at the history of configurations management systems, back in the 90s, we had CF Engine, Puppet came along in the early 2000s, Chef came along a little bit later, and Juju was launched after that. And the interesting thing about Juju is that it is an application management system and a model-driven operations system. It's not a configuration management system. It allows us to encapsulate and share packages of operations code, preferably as open source, and not just operations code, also integration code, so that each different deployment is reusing the same raw materials. The beauty of that is that entirely different OpenStack clouds can reuse those packages and benefit from all of the bug fixing and insights that are being put into those different components effectively. So this is how we wrestle with OpenStack. It's an incredibly powerful idea that has helped Canonical tackle many of the most complex projects in modern scale-out open source. We can share operations code packages, and we can compose them to make what look like unique deployments that still get updates and upgrades. And that's how we manage so many different OpenStack deployments and deliver them so cost effectively. This is how we tame complexity. It makes tailored and optimized OpenStack on specific hardware very tractable. Now that's really important for a large OpenStack environment, and most of the bigger customers are building large OpenStacks. You may have heterogeneous hardware, you may have heterogeneous networking, and you need to be able to wrestle with those components. But not all OpenStack clouds need to be complex. And today I want to focus a little bit on the emerging area of edge computing. The term edge is a bit confusing. Even within a single company, there are many teams with different edges. So we think it's better to describe two classes of compute, the Internet of Things and microclouds. Microclouds are tiny clusters that are typically reproduced across an organization in hundreds of locations. And you can add microclouds to your private clouds and, of course, your public cloud to create the enterprise compute continuum. And so microclouds are a new class of cloud in the enterprise compute landscape. And I want to talk a little bit about OpenStack in the context of microclouds. The challenge, of course, with microclouds is that you don't just have one of them, you have hundreds of microclouds. This is at the remote office, branch office, warehouse, distribution center, building maintenance office, cell tower cluster. And so the question is really how to make it easy to operate OpenStack in this sort of world. We're not trying to mix lots of components here. We're just trying to get a highly repeatable deployment of OpenStack together. There's not a lot of complexity, but there is a lot of fragmentation and scale. So what do? Let's start with a single node OpenStack. And a little while ago, we introduced you to MicroStack, a single package OpenStack. With just 2 commands, you can install MicroStack and then initialize it. And as a developer workstation on that machine, you now have an entire OpenStack on that workstation. And this has become quite popular. Anyone with a spare server or workstation can have an OpenStack endpoint to play with, and it's literally 2 commands to set up. So what's the next step? The next step is to add some nodes. And first we install MicroStack on one node, and then we cluster that through 1 command on the original node, 1 command on each new node, and we form a tiny on-rails OpenStack cluster. And so this is now the simplest possible multi-node OpenStack cloud, and it is perfect for the microcloud environment where you may have many, many deployments, but you want them super simple and on rails. So super simple microclouds. There is a breakout session today at 10:45 Pacific time, which I would encourage you to dig into if you want more details on that. So let's go back to that idea of wrangling complexity, and let me finish the story of Juju. So we launched Juju into a world where you had Chef, and then along came SaltStack and Ansible. Juju, of course, stood apart because it wasn't a configuration management system. It's an application management system. And then in the world of Kubernetes, a really interesting thing happened. configuration management doesn't work there. And so we've seen lots of people playing with similar ideas. We saw Tosca, we saw the Mesos frameworks, we saw CoreOS with operators, and a variety of operator frameworks and lifecycle manager. And so finally, this is really an idea whose time has come, right? So Juju implements what in Kubernetes world is now called the operator pattern. And it allows us to do really amazing things on Kubernetes as well. So this, for example, is Kubeflow, a really complicated set of microservices that together make a fantastic industrial scale ML ops platform. It's very difficult to operationalize without Juju, but Juju makes it really easy. So Juju is an operator lifecycle manager in Kubernetes speak. And what's interesting about it is that it is a universal operator lifecycle manager. It can handle bare metal, which is how we build OpenStack. It can handle VMs, and it can handle containers on Kubernetes. So if you've been paying attention, we can take bare metal, we can use Juju and operators to build OpenStack with all of that flexibility and all of that clarity of architecture. We can then take that OpenStack, we can use operators and Juju to build Kubernetes. And we can then take that Kubernetes and we can use Juju and operators, Juju as an operator lifecycle manager, and we can build things like Kubeflow on top of that Kubernetes. So we have this single beautiful way to model software across all of those three different environments. This has come together really beautifully. It allows us to integrate things on Kubernetes with things on OpenStack and with things on bare metal. If you want to learn more about that, there is a training day on Thursday, and we're going to run 3 sessions at different times for different audiences. For our Asia audience, we'll be kicking off 2 p.m. Shanghai time. For our EMEA audience, we'll be kicking off at 1 p.m. UK time. And for the Americas audience, we'll be kicking off at 2 p.m. East Coast time on Thursday, the 22nd. I hope you can join us. Come and build pure Python operators that are amazing for scale-out software and awesome for integration with other communities. Thank you. Have a great week.
Well, thank you, Mark. That was very interesting. You know, when he was talking about building these projects on top of each other, OpenStack, Kubernetes, Kubeflow, I thought that was just such a good message, and especially the way that he put the emphasis on operations. You know, we have to be able to run these things in production. I think that's a really good thing for us to be thinking about.
Yeah, that was really interesting. And I think our next speaker can also help us understand, really share his wisdom about how all these different communities can work together and how the pieces actually fit together. And that is Thierry Carrez.
Hello, everyone. I would like to talk to you about open infrastructure. What is open infrastructure? And why does it matter? But first, let's talk about infrastructure. What do we mean about infrastructure for applications? When we talk about delivering applications to users, traditionally, you would represent it like this, with users on one side, accessing applications on the other. But the way you deliver those applications has been evolving. 20 years ago, you would procure some physical hardware, and as an application deployer, you would install an operating system, your dependencies, and your applications directly on top of that. Then we started to add more abstractions, more layers. We added hardware virtualization, abstracting the server you're deploying on from the physical hardware that runs it. Then we added cloud APIs to allow to programmatically access those virtualized resources. So you have programmable infrastructure on one side and cloud-native applications being deployed on top of that. More recently, we added a new layer, application deployment APIs. That is what Kubernetes provides, higher level primitives to deploy complex applications on top of this programmable infrastructure. So you get the idea here. There is a growing new role of providing infrastructure for application deployers to deploy on. And that is the population that we care about when we talk about open infrastructure. Giving that population open source solutions for providing infrastructure. And the solution is not one project hosted by one foundation. You have to mix a lot of ingredients, lots of building blocks, to build a solution that is customized to your needs. To facilitate that, we need to collaborate without boundaries, to integrate various solutions, to test that all things work well together. It's especially important that we collaborate with the cloud-native world. There are lots of definitions for cloud-native. My personal definition for cloud-native is applications designed to run on programmable infrastructure. Cloud-native requires programmable infrastructure. Open infrastructure provides an open source solution for that. And so cloud-native and open infrastructure really go together like bread and butter. They're highly complementary open source solutions. Kubernetes in particular provides a great interface to deploy and operate complex applications on top of programmable infrastructure. One does not replace the other. But beyond that, why is open infrastructure important? Why does it matter? Open infrastructure matters because it gives everyone access to infrastructure providing technology, all organizations, all countries. It allows to distribute the future more evenly. And by making those technologies accessible to all, we allow everyone to play and innovate without friction or having to ask for permission. We maximize innovation. And in turn, that innovation leads to completely new use cases. Imagine, for example, a cloud that consumes 10 times less energy, where the heat produced by servers is reused to heat pools or apartment complexes. Imagine, for example, solving the issue of giving high-speed internet access in tribal nations in a way that empowers them to control their future. These are not hypotheticals. To further illustrate what open infrastructure is and why it matters, let's hear now from Thatcher Peskens at LeafCloud and right after Mariel Triggs at MuralNet.
So thank you for having me. Today I'd like to talk about LeafCloud, which is a truly sustainable cloud. In story, I'd like to inspire people to also know that open source makes things possible that were otherwise unthinkable. So what I'd like to talk about is the amount of energy that data centers use. In Netherlands, this is something like 4% of all energy or electricity consumed by data centers. This is more than Amsterdam in Netherlands. In the US, it's something like more than New York City. But what's the problem? These data centers are really giant heaters. They use lots of electricity and they blow all this heat into the air and essentially just waste it. We have radically reimagined how a data center works. And so what we do is we take out these servers from the data center and move them to these leaf sites. At these leaf sites, we also are able to reuse the heat. And so we put these in things like the basement and supply the hot water to the apartments that are in there for energy saving purposes. In addition to that, we have this disaggregated storage architecture. So we put the compute and the storage at different places so that customers of ours can actually rely on something that is reliable. Because if any given site would fail, we just reschedule and restart our services elsewhere. All of this is possible because we use a lot of open source projects. We are fully based on OpenStack. And for example, Masakari is one of these projects that allows us to do these quick failovers, but also CloudKitty, Vial, Ceph, Masakari, Cola Ansible. These are other projects that all of us have been working on and make this possible to do so much for us. So this is LeafCloud. Please find more information about us. Thank you.
Hello, everyone. My name is Mariel Triggs, and I run a small nonprofit called MuralNet. I'm joining you live from Alaska. What we do here is we work with Indigenous communities in order to design, build, and control their internet access future through deploying fixed wireless networks. Rural broadband is a tough issue, and one of the things that makes it so tough is getting spectrum and making these networks economically viable. And one of the key ways to do that is using open source LTE cores, such as Magma. Instead of having to pay $70,000 plus for a proprietary core or some monthly subscription fee, Magma allows people to download the whole core off the internet, off of GitHub, learn how to run it, and that's perfect for our pilot deployments. Now, we normally help folks get started with their networks, and in 2020, what we found is our pilot program was actually an excellent way of addressing the COVID-19 crisis. These emergency builds that they evolved into were excellent to get communities online, get elders access to the healthcare, students access to the distance learning, and families and people just access to the outside world so that they can try to continue with the most normal way of life as they can. Now, once you have a pilot network and you learn what you want to do with it, and you can form your broadband vision, that's where scalability came in. And a great example of that is the Macaw tribe. They started with just $10,000 worth of equipment in order to connect about 25 homes in May. And by October of this year, they've already have plans to expand and connect every single household within their community. I want to thank Cisco for actually recognizing the power of these fixed wireless networks running on open source cores in order to make sustainable tribal networks. And I have a call to action for you all. What I would hope for you folks that would be able to do is help us make these open source cores more accessible and more scalable by making more hardware compatible with it and make GUI much more accessible for folks to learn and train on. So thank you so much for all your efforts. And if you want to learn more about us, please join us at MuralNet.org. Thank you.
The next Superuser Awards nominee is the Adobe Platform Infrastructure Team.
Sergey Levitsky, Platform Infrastructure Manager, speaking from a cool virtual Adobe office in San Jose, California. Adobe has a long commitment to open infrastructure. From being one of the largest contributors to taking part in presenting various events, meetups, and summits, we grew together with the open source communities. OpenStack, Kubernetes, Hadoop, Kafka, and Hubble are key open source infrastructure platforms across Adobe. Speaking of OpenStack, our journey started as experiment 6 years ago that grew exponentially to geo-distributed platform encompassing 500 plus hypervisors, 13,000 virtual instances, and 3.5 petabytes of set storage. It helped us accelerating QA cycle by automatically spinning up various operating systems to be tested, reducing the time to push to production. Time is a great competitive advantage for Adobe continuous success in the marketplace. This year, we completed an exciting 9-month-long project, seamlessly migrating all of our 5 clusters to a new version of OpenStack, while introducing salt-based management framework built upon infrastructure as a code approach. Not only it allows us to move faster, it has also opened up endless possibilities of taking advantage of latest innovations in open infrastructure. Thank you for your consideration.
Well, congratulations on your Superuser nomination, Adobe. And we just saw a lot of great content there.
Yeah.
We got to hear from Thierry, and also 2 really interesting use cases, I think, with LeafCloud and MuralNet, where we heard about their production use cases of open source software.
Yeah, I mean, we're always talking about how we want to help build communities that write software for production. But for me, I mean, it's just really special to hear from these users that they're not only going to production, but they're really doing some good in the world. Talking about the environmental use case at LeafCloud and then MuralNet, talking about connecting these underserved communities. I mean, it makes me feel really proud to be a part of a community that's writing software that's being run, not just for production, but to actually connect people to economic opportunity and just connect people in general. It's pretty awesome.
Yeah, and you know, that's actually the second sustainable cloud use case that we've had in the OpenStack community. Cloud and Heat, based in Germany, has done a similar thing. So it's really cool that's the power of open source, is it lets you deploy the software in so many different ways, and like you said, do good along the way.
That reminds me, do not forget to fill out the user survey. The user survey is one of the ways we find out about these users that are running this open source software in production. So take that user survey, please.
Yeah, so you mentioned the user survey, and I think that we've just recently pulled the most recent data from the user survey.
Yes.
And I know you love big stats.
Oh, yes. So. Well, drum roll. We actually have now over 15 million cores of compute in production running, being powered by OpenStack software. So that's a huge milestone, and we got some other users we're hearing from soon.
Yes,
that are part of that number.
Exactly. I was going to say, that number has grown from 10 million cores to 15 million cores in the last couple of years.
That's right.
And it's been great to see that growth. One of the organizations that has had a growing OpenStack environment is Workday. And we had a chance to sit down and chat with Imtiaz Chowdhury from Workday about their use case, what's driving that growth, and what's important to them with infrastructure. So let's look at that discussion with Imtiaz. Imtiaz, thank you for joining us. It's really exciting to have Workday here talking about their deployment. Can you tell us what you're using OpenStack for and why you're seeing so much growth in your environment?
Thanks, Jonathan, for your question. We're using OpenStack to deploy applications and running microservices at Workday. It allows developers to build ones and deploy their application across all the data centers in a very consistent manner. We are experiencing a good rapid growth at Workday of our OpenStack deployments. One of the primary reasons is the Workday's business growth itself. As we are getting new customers, we need to grow our platform where we are running our applications. And also another driver is moving legacy applications to a virtualized platform. Our current deployment of OpenStack, we are running on 5 different data centers. We have 45 running clusters, 39,000 something VM, and 422,000 cores.
Wow. So you've got this growing development at Workday for OpenStack. So I guess I'd love to know what's next for the growing deployment that you have, and how can the community really help you out?
Thanks, Mark. As we are growing, some of the things that are changing is architectural evolution. Instead of using virtual machine-based deployment, we are going also into the container and Kubernetes-based deployment. Kubernetes currently are running on top of OpenStack. That's our chosen platform. We are also going through some network architecture changes, which calls for some features that we need from Neutron. We would be reaching out to the Neutron developers later this week, and we will formally propose some RFPs for some of the support that we need. Also, as we are exploring Kubernetes, some of the features that our OpenStack projects that we are looking for are Magnum, Courier, and also Octavia for load balancing. Some of the areas where community can help us is definitely support for new features. We have looked at Ironic in the past, but its scalability was a big concern, and also support for firmware support. And we are looking forward to CERN's session later this week. And I know there is another session that talks about how Ironic is being used for firmware support, lifecycle management. We're looking forward to those sessions. One of the big asks to the community is long-term release support for OpenStack. We don't want to upgrade. We would like to upgrade more frequently if the upgrade was more easy to do.
Well, CERN is an awesome resource both for Ironic. They also run a lot of Magnum clusters and a lot of Kubernetes. So it's great that we're going to be able to hear from them at the event this week. So you're a Superuser nominee this year, which is exciting. It's great to have Workday represented there. Could you tell us about the team behind your OpenStack deployment?
Sure. So these are the team members that we have. They're spread across Pleasanton, California, Beaverton, Oregon, and Dublin, Ireland. They're the ones who made this massive OpenStack deployment possible, and to keep it running and make it scalable.
That's great.
We also have a session coming up this week. So I would like everyone to join our session where we talk about how Workday manages capacity across 5 different data centers and 45 different clusters.
And we've shown that on the screen when the session is. So everyone go check out Workday's session where you can learn about how they're managing 45 clusters and this growing deployment. We really appreciate you joining the summit and getting your team involved to share your knowledge with the community. And we also appreciate you taking some time to tell us about your deployment here. So thanks, Imtiaz.
Thanks, Jonathan. Thanks, Mark.
Thanks.
The next Superuser Awards nominee is the Workday Private Cloud team.
Business change is happening faster than ever before. new business models, new competition, new ways of working. But when you have a business system that delivers continuous innovation and a partner who's committed to your success, you can stay one step ahead. Meet Workday. Workday provides a cloud-native system with finance, HR, planning, and analysis all in one, allowing you to surface insights, respond to change, and work more efficiently than ever. With a single finance, HR, and planning system from Workday, you can change as your needs change and shape your future.
Workday uses OpenStack for three primary business reasons. First, to offer an agile and consistent way to deploy applications across data centers. Second, to migrate applications to a cost-effective virtualized platform. And finally, provide an infrastructure for running new Kubernetes apps. Workday's journey with OpenStack began in 2013 when the cloud engineering team was formed. Since then, its OpenStack footprint rapidly grew. Workday Private Cloud, or OpenStack Cloud, now runs on 5 data centers. There are 45 clusters, 39,000 running VMs, 422,000 cores, and 7,600 hypervisors. Workday contributes back to the open source community by presenting and participating in OpenStack summits, organizing meetups, and contributing code. And finally, the team that made it all possible.
Thanks, Imtiaz, and also congratulations on your nomination as a super user. In addition to talking with Imtiaz about Workday's production deployment, we had the opportunity to speak with one of our board members and the leader of a public cloud service in Europe who is really passionate about digital sovereignty and the importance of controlling our data, understanding how our data is used, where it sits, who has access to it. And this is something that I think is a growing trend around the world that people are aware we need to make sure we understand what's happening with our data. So we were able to sit down and talk with Johan Christenson, the CEO of City Network, and he gave us a little bit of insight into how important digital sovereignty is in the infrastructure world.
Hey, Johan, great to see you. Just love to jump right into it here. So how do you see European organizations impacted by data sovereignty requirements?
So listen, we all know that digital is taking over in a big way. And over the last 10 years, we've also realized the value of data. Not just the value of data, but also the fact that it can do damage to us. So over the last few years, Europe and of course a lot of other countries have come up with a lot of new different laws to protect individuals, privacy, and of course a bunch of other things related to business. I think everybody's heard of GDPR at this point, and it is Europe's big law as far as privacy goes and making sure that privacy is adhered to in a way that protects all the citizens. This July, something very large happened, or a big thing happened. July 16th, the Court of Justice of the European Union, which is our highest court, actually invalidated what's called Privacy Shield. So Privacy Shield is something that we've had between the EU and the US to allow for data to be transferred over to the US. And the fact that that was invalidated, it means that just about no US-based service today is legal for European companies to have any type of what's called PII data, personal data. And that has, of course, created havoc in a big way in Europe today. Of course, it's something that's been growing during the years as well, right? So at this point, Europe is in a pickle. We cannot adhere to our own laws. And at the same time, we've grown monopolies or oligopolies over here in the sense that Europe has not come out with its own infrastructure services. We've kind of fallen back to a few big global players, and we're stuck in that situation. So sovereignty is becoming critically important in the sense, both from having choice and not being dependent on one or two companies for their things, as well as, of course, long-term innovation for Europe as a whole.
Wow. So how does open source and open infrastructure fit into all of this?
Well, listen, there's a lot of lot of ways that open source helps in and around it. For me, it comes down to choice. Whether choice of vendor that you want to run a specific type of workload, or technology, for example, like 5G, where potentially you want to have control and be able to run it the way you want to. So open source allows you to do it your way, and it, of course, allows you to do more than you can do by yourself. There are technical advantages. If you imagine, federation becomes easier. We all talk about multi-cloud and so forth. Or just wanting transportability of data becomes easier as well. And if you look at one step further, governments have not been so heavily involved in open source, but we see that changing now as well, because again, it's really the only way that countries can start building services in any type, shape, or fashion that competes with some of these bigger players and can keep up with innovation that's needed within in a country today to stay relevant.
Yeah, that's really interesting. So another question I wanted to ask, I've heard about this thing called Gaia X. Can you tell us a bit about what is that?
Yeah, sure. So Gaia X is an initiative that started in Germany, and it really comes down to wanting to create a framework that allows services to be created, infrastructure services to be created in an open way and a collaborative way, but also then based on European values and European laws. Coming back to this whole thing of having these few players kind of taking over the market completely, Europe is looking to see how can we create less dependency. And the idea is, of course, if you can come up with a better standardized, vetted type of stack, it will allow more companies to create something in an easier fashion. And also standardizing the regulatory side also becomes easier for companies to create those types of services, because Europe is looking to make sure that it's not just one or two players that compete. So France joined into this effort as well, and now lots of other European companies are doing the same, and therefore we also believe that governments are going to get into the business of open source, because it's a good thing for the citizens.
Great. Well, thank you so much, Johan. Very informative as always. Thank you.
Thanks so much.
Well, that was a really interesting discussion. I couldn't get a word in edgewise. You and Johan,
we like to get chatty Cathys.
But I think it is a really important thing to think about, and something that, again, open infrastructure gives us power and control over our data and our computing. Mm-hmm. So great points that he made.
Yeah, and next up, we're going to be hearing from an engineer actually from Ant Group. And Ant Group is a huge financial services company, fintech. And of course, they also happen to be the world's largest payment processor. So to tell us about Kata 2.0 and what they're doing over there at Ant Group, I'm really happy to introduce my friend Wang.
Thanks, Mark and Jonathan. Hello, world. It's my pleasure to give a presentation here for the audience from all over the world. I'm Wang from the Ant Group, and also a member of Kata Containers community. I'd like to share some progress of the Kata project with you. In 2018, we announced Kata Containers 1.0 in Vancouver. After that, we keep improving the Kata Containers and contribute to related communities. And we have released 12 1.0 stable releases in the past 2 years. Today, we are proud to announce the release of 2.0 of Kata. Lightweight is a feature of the Kata. In 2.0, one of the major improvements is to reduce the sandboxing overhead. By rewriting the Kata agent with Rust language and employing TTRPC instead of the gRPC for the agent protocol, the Kata agents have already changed the memory consumption from 11 megabytes to 400 or 300 kilobytes. That's about 1/40 of the 1.x. And another major improvement in 2.0 is about the operability and debuggability. we improved the metrics API in 2.0. And also, we provide a Kata agent control tool for debugging. And for other improvements, we have better cloud hypervisor support. And also, we improved the image handling. And this feature is still on the way and will appear in the next release of the 2.0 series. And yeah, now I'd like to tell you that the Kata 2.0 has been ready for production now. Yeah, last summit, Adobe got the Superuser Award for their Kata deployment. Well, in our group, we have several thousands of the nodes that have Kata containers running on. And part of the nodes have been upgraded to 2.0 preview version. And they have been tested for months. So I like to say, when it is released, the Kata 2.0 have already been production ready. And we deployed the Kata container for financial grade infra architecture, and we call it trust native. It's not only about the security isolation, but also for the performance isolation and failure isolation. That helps running heterogeneous workload on the uniform platform. And also, it can restrict the explosion radius of any potential software failure. For example, if there is a container that triggers a kernel panic, it can only affect the same part, but not affect the other parts on the same node. And we believe the secure container, the Kata containers, it will be the cornerstone for the future's financial grade IT infrastructure. Well, Kata containers is still an actively developing project, and the community is working on adding more features for it. Any contributions are welcome, and there are several Kata-related topics in this summit. Welcome to watch them online. Thank you.
Thanks, Shu. That was an awesome update on Kata containers, and especially hearing about all of the improvements in 2.0. Man, decreasing that memory footprint is great. I think you said, the goal is for it to be invisible. That's really important when you're running a large number of containers at scale. I mean, some users out there are running millions of containers in their environments. And I think it's also awesome to hear how Ant Group is already running Kata Containers 2.0 in production. So thank you for that update. Now joining us again here, we have Allison Price. Allison's going to be sharing some of her tips for getting the most out of the summit and some of her favorite content.
Yeah, so this week there are over 100 sessions, and I want to share some of my personal favorites. So the first is one from Red Hat. They're going to be talking about running OpenStack and Kubernetes in production, which is a really popular combination with open source technologies. The next session I want to recommend is from Tencent. They're actually running one of the biggest OpenStack and ARM production environments. So head to that session to learn more about what they're doing. The next one is FiberHome. They contribute both to OpenStack and Starling X, especially around edge computing requirements. So head to their session to see how they're making the edge computing use case in production more successful. Now, the last session, you can't come to an open infrastructure summit without hearing what CERN is doing. Now, we've been talking about what's happening for the next decade, but head to that session to hear what CERN has been doing for the last 10 years to get their production OpenStack environment to 300,000 cores. Now, I know there's a lot of sessions, so I actually want to show you how to build your personal schedule. So once the keynotes are over and the Q&A is completed, head to the top of the platform and you'll see Summit Schedule. Here, you can check out all of the different sessions, including the ones I recommended, and add them to your personal schedule, just like Victoria recommended earlier today. Now, I'm not going to lie, I have a lot of building to do because there's a lot of other sessions that caught my attention too. So I'm actually going to give this chair back to Mark so that him and Jonathan can do the live Q&A, but I'll see y'all in those sessions later.
Okay, so that is the kind of the set of content that we had ready to go for today, and now we're going to have the opportunity to do some Q&A. And tell me with that, we've got Mark Collier back on the stage with us here. So welcome back, Mark.
Thank you.
It's been a jam-packed day so far, I think.
Yeah.
And it's been interesting because we've had to kind of watch a few different channels since we had some problems with our app this morning that we're still working on. I noticed that there were a couple of questions that were around where we are located.
Oh yeah, where are we right now?
Where are we? Yes.
Yeah. So we're actually at.
There was a theory that this was your house.
Not yet. I haven't moved in here permanently, but it seems like the last few months I've been mostly here. But this is actually our office in Austin. We have a small office. It is kind of an old home that was converted into an office, so it does look homey, but it's actually an office space. And I wish you could all see the array of cameras behind us. I'll probably post a photo on Twitter. So there's my teaser, Sparky Collier on Twitter. But I did take a little video earlier just to show I was just thought it was really cool, all the cameras and lights, and we've taken a really tiny little office space and kind of hopefully made it work for at least put a couple people on screen.
Yeah, and some people were asking about how we're doing it in person, et cetera.
Right.
And I think that one of the things that obviously we're not in person as a community because of the COVID situation, and what we've done is we've got a real trimmed down crew here that has been helping us to put the show on, and then we also actually have a remote crew which is made up of some of our longtime F&Tech production team that many of you know and appreciate and love and have met at many of our events, but. So we kind of built a little bit of a set in our office, and we've been filming from here.
And we also to be responsible, we all got tested and were thankfully negative for COVID. So that was part of our trying to stay safe.
We all wear our masks when we're not on camera. So it's been an interesting kind of different scenario as we put this together this time. But I think it's turning out pretty well. The content has just been amazing. And one of the things that we mentioned was early on was that we just announced that we are becoming the Open Infrastructure Foundation.
That's right. Here we are.
Yeah,
one more
cheers again. Cheers again.
I think several of you have posted your cheers on social media with We Are OpenInfra.
I saw one from Rico Lynn earlier.
Yeah, Rico. Shout out to Rico.
So I think that this is really big news. It's something that obviously I think we've been working towards as a community over the last few years, and great response so far from everyone. I think that to me it's just a sign of how much more work there is for all of us to do. I think that I'm obviously like neck deep in open source and open source infrastructure all day long, and it can feel like it's something that's really pervasive, but I think that what we see is just more and more growth, more and more new deployments coming, and so that it's clear that there's a lot of other opportunity. To get there, though, we've got to figure out how to pull in even more of these open source projects and make them work together as systems, and I think that's really what the mission is all about.
Yeah, more open source than ever. I think reflecting back from 10 years ago of launching OpenStack to where it is today. I mean, everything that's going on in cloud these days, it seems like is open source first, which I think is an amazing development and quite different than really looking back a decade ago. And we've been talking a lot today about the next decade of open source infrastructure. And like you said, there's tons of work to be done. And actually, I mentioned a little bit ago that we had just last week a board meeting where 4 new companies applied to be platinum members of the foundation. And so that's just another sign that more companies are realizing that open is the way. So
yeah, we will actually start 2021 with more platinum members than we've ever had before, which is a pretty cool milestone.
That is.
Okay,
crazy.
So we have some of our speakers that are joining us again that we can get a chance to follow up with them. One of the questions that was put into chat, and feel free to throw other questions in if you have them, throw them in the YouTube chat. But one of them was for Victoria, who was speaking about different ways to get involved. And we had a couple of questions. Victoria, maybe you could tell people a little bit more about where they can find information on these items. They were
internships.
Yeah, I think they were specifically interested in the resources and the internships and where they can go to learn about this, because I think it's something that people were interested in.
All right, sure. Can you hear me okay?
All right, sure. Can you hear me okay?
I think so. So I'm going to go ahead and just give you some tips on which of the resources you can access right now. Perhaps, so for how to get involved, maybe the best way, at least for me, was to check on the mailing list. We do have the OpenStack Discuss mailing list. Usually it has high traffic, and most of the questions regarding projects or a task or any kind of technical discussion usually goes there. So that's a great place for you to check in. Also, and perhaps one of the most communication tools I love the most is IRC. We do have a lot of channels over there that you can check into, and you can go there and make questions. Right now, we are using one that is for the summit, which is OpenInfra-summit on the Freenode server. So if you have any question about the summit or what is going on or where to check for sessions, please go there. We also have a different channel for different purposes, but if you see one project you are interested about and you want to go to chime in there and ask for questions, check out the full list of channels. We have every single channel listed on the contributor portal, which is my next advice. Check out the contributor portal for check on more ways on how to get involved. And finally, I just want to make a quick note that next week we have the OpenStack DTG. So if you're interested about any of the projects and you want to contribute and you want to learn more about those projects, check out, there is a schedule, and we have a lot of topics for discussion. So feel free to register and join us for the discussions. About the internships, right now we are on the application phase for outreach internships. For the current round, we usually have 2 rounds on the year. One is on summer for the Southern Hemisphere. So this one is the one that is going on right now. And the next one is for summer for the Northern Hemisphere, which starts on February. The current round is closed now for applications, but if you're interested in contributing and you want to apply, keep connected with us either on IRC or in the mailing list, and we can give you more details on how to apply for the next round in February. At the same time, happening in Google Summer of Code.
Okay, great. Well, thank you for all of that information, Victoria.
Thank you so much.
Many, many ways to get involved, and I think that as Victoria said in her session, the community, it's a friendly community. It's very welcoming. So join us, join in any of these projects. It's really a great place to come and kind of get some open source experience. Tomorrow we actually have another session where we hear from a recent college graduate.
Oh yes.
That just went through the experience, and now his code is running live in production, which is another cool story. So next up. We are going to go to Amar. Amar spoke about Facebook connectivity and their mission and Magma. And one of the things that I'm really excited about with Magma is the approach that it takes to the architecture of the software itself. Mm-hmm. As Amar was talking about, kind of making it easier and more cost-effective for people in underconnected areas to get access to networks. He showed a little bit of the diagram of Magma, but what I wanted to ask Amar to dive into a little bit is to maybe, Amar, you can explain exactly what about that architecture really enables the ability to kind of deploy it more cost effectively and operate it more cost effectively across that kind of converging the services and distributing them and operating them in a more cloud native way.
Awesome. Actually, great question, Jonathan. So I think maybe I would break this down into 3 aspects. So the first one is deployment size. So I think one of the things as we go towards more emerging market sort of deployments, there are a lot of creative sort of infrastructure operators who are sort of trying to build infrastructure in a sort of an incremental way. And existing sort of network core architectures are sort of built for scale from day one, right? So being able to decompose that problem into, small sort of Lego building blocks and then laddering them up for scale is actually a pretty critical thing. And a lot of the work that that's happening around containerization and edge clouds here is actually applicable in that model. So for that to be able to happen, we needed to decompose the core itself to actually allow for that. So that's the first part of the problem. The second part of the problem is the actual access technology. There are places like Brazil which have a lot of permissive LTE spectrum licensing, but mostly restricted to higher bands. So phones don't support these bands, and so in many cases, it's like at the end of the day, you're trying to bring a user online through Wi-Fi, and having to deploy an entirely different network when you're trying to either offer services through cellular or through Wi-Fi actually adds a lot of operational overhead. And so one of the key tenets that we have is, regardless of how you're getting onto the network looks the same. And then the third one, which is around flexible sort of business policies. Some of the limitations that we have with 3GPP architectures is its strict adherence to diameter and various protocols that are hard to operationalize. So we've sort of taken a fairly modern REST-based approach. So it's almost like any BSS can sort of offer that service. So combining these three aspects, we think we can sort of solve for a lot of the heterogeneity that we're starting to see in connectivity infrastructure that cannot be solved by the main sort of tier one deployment architectures.
Great. Well, I think that when we first started talking about Magma, that architecture really stood out to me as something that I think is key to the advantages of Magma. And tomorrow, again, I'm going to just keep promoting the awesome talks we have tomorrow. But tomorrow we have a very entertaining session from Boris Rinsky, where he is going to be showing us how to build.
Fair warning.
Yeah.
This is your Boris warning.
A private LTE network. He's got a little bit of a throwback in there to an OpenStack Summit session he did in 2013. But the thing that I think is very interesting about Magma and that architecture that Amar was just telling us about is it's going to enable new types of networks that we haven't necessarily been thinking of as like, we could build an LTE network for this. We could build a Wi-Fi network for this. We could combine them all. It's something where we're getting more options because the cost is coming down. The size of those deployments can be smaller and still be cost effective. And I think that that's going to open up a lot of innovation in the networking space.
Yeah, and I think a lot of the Magma use cases are running on OpenStack. So that's a really cool way to see those different tools working together. I think a lot of deployments are coming soon to a bunch of different telcos looking at that stack. So the next set of questions, we actually had a lot of interest in talking to Mark Shuttleworth and Canonical. I think OpenStack operations is such a great topic, so I'm glad he spoke to that. So there are actually 4 questions that I'm going to throw to Mark. The first, and I'll just throw them all out to you, Mark, and you can pick and choose. The first one was, how do you manage non-application resources with an application management system? Good question. Second was, is MicroStack just in the 20.04 LTS repos? The third question was, what are the differences and advantages of MicroK8s versus K3S? I'm not sure how you pronounce that, the Rancher option. And the fourth question, frankly, was for me, which is, what's it like to go to outer space? I mean, I don't know. That's just, if you have time, you can tell us about space. But otherwise, maybe stick to operations.
Right. Well, that's a great set of questions. Thank you. So I guess the first question is in a software-defined world, where do you draw the line between applications and infrastructure, right? If infrastructure is really just applications, then isn't application management really also a path to infrastructure management? If we zoom out a little bit, we're at this amazing time in history when almost everything is becoming software and almost everything's becoming open source as well. But there's a lot of it. And even though the software itself is free, integrating it, updating it, operating it is where all of the cost really is. Many people, I think, have been surprised at the challenges of operationalizing 20, 30, 50 pieces of Python, which is OpenStack, because all of those pieces have to work well together, and then they all have to be upgraded together. And then, over time, you're doing things like integrating new parts and extending that. But you see the same sorts of challenges if you go up to the application layer, where increasingly in a microservices world, you've got a million different pieces of software that are coming from lots of different places. They're coming at you very fast. They're changing very fast. And you need to essentially build topologies of those and evolve those topologies over time. So if you just sort of ask the question, in a software-defined world, what's an application and what's infrastructure? Is OpenStack applications? Yes, it's Python applications. We can look at them. And it's also infrastructure, right? So all we're trying to do is try to get to the zen of the problem of operating and integrating and scaling software very fast, and trying to make that a problem that people can solve together as open source, rather than problems that people try and solve in private, which is essentially the custom operations code and integration code that everybody writes to make stuff work, right? So when you see it through that lens, solving for the operations of Hadoop, solving for the operations of Spark, solving for the operations of Kubernetes, solving for the operations of OpenStack is, there's a lot of commonality there, and finding a common framework for that has been the work of a good decade. But it's quite exciting how that's come together. Kubernetes, of course, makes many things better. But it also, you could argue, it just makes a lot of problems happen faster and requires a whole new level of thinking about applications and new set of skills. If we can provide a common framework for talking about an application that's neutral to whether you're on Kubernetes or whether you're on bare metal or whether you're on VMs, that's a very powerful idea, and it allows people to talk about how they integrate stuff regardless of where it is or what the sort of substance of that software is. MicroStack is delivered as a snap, which makes it quite platform independent. The same snap will sit on certainly Ubuntu 18 and 20, possibly Debian, and more recent versions of other Linuxes as well. We're working towards fully containerizing OpenStack. So a snap can be partially containerized, where its file system is separate. And it can be fully containerized, where we use more of the kernel confinement mechanisms to confine the application. Once we have it fully containerized, I'd be very confident to say it should work on any modern Linux. But today, your best bet is a recent Ubuntu or Debian. The difference between MicroK8s and K3s. So interestingly, K3s started out as essentially a hard, I don't want to say fork, but certainly a hard branch of Kubernetes, where they were ripping out a lot of Kubernetes services in order to shrink the footprint. Whereas we focused with MicroK8s, we focused really just on packaging in a single package, standard Kubernetes. The K3s folks have now essentially come to a similar conclusion. And so K3s now doesn't remove as much of Kubernetes. And in fact, they do something interesting in terms of combining the process that essentially stands up containers, the worker process, with things like the API server processes to reduce the number of processes that you have. Whereas we essentially just take those processes and put them in a single package. So because of us both solving problems that people faced, I think we're converging to a similar place, which is that it's really about providing people with a very opinionated approach to Kubernetes, which, if it works for you, essentially removes all of the operational complexity of Kubernetes. Of course, if that set of opinionated choices doesn't work for you, then you want something, a different distribution that can handle permutations and combinations of all the things that Kubernetes can do. But I would say both MicroK8s and K3s today have a similar DNA, which is be small, be opinionated, essentially have one movement for the user, which is just install one package and run it to get a basic cluster up and running. I think I've probably used up all of my budget. On space, I can simply say, I highly recommend it. But when you get there, when you look that way, it's scary. And when you look down, it's beautiful. So maybe that tells us something about the human condition.
Wow. I've always wanted to ask you that. So thank you for doing it on live Q&A on Zoom, YouTube.
Mark and I think would both love to go to space and experience that. If you look out there, it's scary. If you look down, it's beautiful. It's a perspective that not a lot of people have had.
I'm ready. We have time still?
Well, we've got a few more questions we've got to get through.
Got it.
So next up, we're going to talk with Allison Randall, and I think that Allison is someone who has experience across a wide variety of open source communities and foundations, and I really appreciated her perspective earlier. She's been really involved in the OpenStack community.
On our board as well.
Yeah, on our board, and several years ago, we started having some strategic discussions with kind of what we call the joint leadership team within OpenStack, which was like the TC, the technical committee, the user committee, the board of directors, staff, all of this kind of group of people coming together. And Allison spent a lot of time going out and driving discussions and collecting data and information and perspectives that has really informed all of the steps we've taken since then to get us to where we are now. But the thing that I would love to just hear some of your thoughts on, Allison, are kind of as we look at the next decade, where do you think foundations can really add value to projects? Because I think that 10 years ago, one of the things that I would say has changed is 10 years ago, I think people were especially in kind of the corporate world, less familiar with engaging directly in open source. And I think that a big part of our role early on was just kind of helping corporations to be comfortable with committing to open source. I've done so many calls with so many corporate IP lawyers over the years, and kind of helping them to understand the legal framework and how it works if they're going to share their code and all that kind of stuff. I think where we are now, we see this explosion of open source, especially on places like GitHub. And we see, a lot of foundations, and sometimes we see different approaches to it. To me, it's something that I think is going to evolve a lot and change over the next 10 years of open source. And I would love to just hear some of your thoughts on where you think foundations can add value to communities and projects, and to the open source ecosystem overall, to really drive, healthy communities, good code, and great engagement across the spectrum.
I think it's probably helpful to kind of look at it over the past 20 years, because when the name open source started in just before 2000, at that time, there was a need for a foundation, partly because you needed a foundation to host your infrastructure, like all of your mailing lists, all of your source control. And then there were also a few other things that foundations were able to provide. But each foundation was kind of like a little island, you could kind of just see this isolated foundation, and it would support one little set of projects, and that's it. I think over time, part of the shift has been, in 2005, I started this group for connecting leadership of different open source foundations. And that was totally radical at that point. It's why would you have different open source foundation leaderships talking to each other? But it's been over 15 years. It's been really valuable. So you see that happening. Instead of being little isolated islands, the foundations are now an interconnected network. And that's been really helpful. I think that's one of the things we still have a lot of work to do in the next 10 years, is that you will see more and more. And that's one of the things I appreciate about the Open Infrastructure Foundation, is this perspective, understanding that it's not just our island, it is in fact a network of projects. And, we need to pay attention to the integration and strategy across an array of different projects that actually do have interconnections at the technical level. So if you have the interconnections at the leadership level, it really helps. I think another thing that's kind of been through an arc is in the 90s, there wasn't so much a concept that every foundation had to have every project had to have a big foundation sort of behind it. And we've kind of been through from there through to, now every single project needs a foundation. And then it seems like we're kind of coming back around to understanding, a foundation is the perfect way of growing some projects. Other projects, especially smaller projects, if you've got 2 developers working on something, you may not need that big formal connection. So I think And it actually goes back to the network between foundations. Another thing we're going to see more and more of is, just being open to the fact that open source is ubiquitous. It's happening everywhere. It's not just happening here in our island. It's happening throughout the world. And just making sure that we're open-minded and welcoming to whatever form of open source needs to happen. Like the real key is it the four opens, right? Is it open source license? So that's the key. It's not open source if it's not open source license. But then also, open design, open community, open development. Those things are what matters. And whether it has a formal relationship with the foundation or not, it matters less. And I think that's something we're going to see maybe more of, maybe less of, I'm not sure. But over the next 10 years, that's something we're going to have to keep an eye on strategically. And I think in terms of the relationship with companies, it's been a huge change in that, even over the past 20 years, from complete unfamiliarity to gradually becoming more and more engaged. In some of the talks I give, I have this scale of engagement. And it's like as a company becomes more and more engaged, they get more benefits, more value out of open source, and also contribute more value. And the highest tier of that, the highest tier of engagement is a co-ownership. And that is to say that individuals and companies and foundations all collaborate as peers together. It's not like one dominates, the other dominates. But there's a whole range. There's like 6 stages all the way up to that level. And there's a whole range out there of companies who are like at the very basic level of just using open source and nothing else. So part of our task as open source leaders over the next 10 years is helping more and more companies take those stages up the ladder, but also being, welcoming and accepting and understanding, even if they're only at use, that's good. That's better than not using. So that's a step up, and kind of, helping them see the additional benefits for each step up the ladder. I think those would probably be the big things. I think the other thing you're going to see more and more of over the next 10 years is, right now it already feels like so much of the world that was proprietary software is now open source software. That trend is just going to continue. So proprietary software is strategically successful in an environment of scarcity. Like when there isn't any competition, it can be very successful. But as a particular domain broadens out and there are many competing solutions, actually open source will consistently win because it takes away those barriers to entry and allows innovation to happen faster. So that would be the last thing I would say we really need to keep an eye on over the next 10 years.
Thank you. That was wonderful.
Yeah, I mean, you were really, let's see, today you made a Vulkan reference, and now you're talking about market dynamics. These are all the things that gets Mark just really interested in a topic.
Yeah, I was on the edge of my seat. Yeah, absolutely. I loved it. And I think, you make such a good point about the market forces, and sort of as each particular problem domain, somebody starts to solve it in the open, not just like on their own, but in a broader sort of like four opens kind of way. It tends to become the way that, the winning solution, for lack of a better word. It tends to be because it's a better way to solve the problem. So anyway, long story short, I agree with you. And I would just say that I think that was really helpful in sort of breaking down this hierarchical worldview that so many people come from sort of like the corporate way of thinking about things, and open source is so not that, and it takes people time to kind of level up to the top. But the structures we think about, org charts and hierarchy, sort of organizational structures, just don't make sense when you're trying to wrap your head around a big, broad open source community. So with that, I'll just throw to our last question we're going to have, which is for Thierry Carrez. And so Thierry, the question for you is really kind of related and connected here as well, which is, when you talk about the definition of open infrastructure, as you did earlier, do you mean that in sort of like an exclusive way, like this is the defined set of projects or communities that fit within it, or more of a kind of a broad sense of the problem domain and all the pieces that might be developed in different communities?
Oh, it's actually a very broad definition, but I'm trying to what I've been trying to explain during the talk was that it's really a question of everything you put in place to provide infrastructure for others to develop and deploy their applications on. So that can be in a very broad sense. It can be infrastructure for connectivity at the very basic layer. It can be infrastructure for compute, storage, and networking, but it can also be infrastructure, just programmable infrastructure that you can use in a very generic way. So obviously, it's more than just one foundation. It's more than just one project. It's really a problem space and a population that has been appearing over the last 10 years. There used to be nobody between the application deployers and the hardware. But now, 10 years later, there is really a group of operators that their role is to provide that infrastructure for others to build and deploy on. There is the public infrastructure side where if you provide services for anyone around the world with a credit card, or there is the private infrastructure side for the needs of a given organization for specific capabilities or for data sovereignty or for many other reasons why you would maintain private infrastructure. But those jobs are the same. Those jobs are about providing infrastructure for others to build and deploy on. And that role is relatively new. It didn't exist 10 years ago. And now you can see that role appearing everywhere. And what we're providing as the Open Infrastructure Foundation now is support for that group of operators that want to build infrastructure using open source solutions. So that ranges obviously from OpenStack, but also to Kata Containers, which provides a solution for deploying containers securely in production, to Magma, which provides connectivity for populations that could not have connectivity before. And what I really like about it is that it really enables new innovation, things that we never thought were possible or even would not have been possible without open source technologies to play with. And the LeafCloud example is really interesting because it's deconstructing completely the paradigm of centralized data centers. And by doing so, they managed to build a public cloud that consumes 10 times less energy than a traditional data center cloud. And that type of innovation would never have been possible without open infrastructure, without open source solutions for providing infrastructure, because that enables innovation. When you just put technology out there available for everyone, people play with it and innovate with it. So that's the key message. It's more than just one project. It's more than just one foundation. It's just more than just one community. It's really a group of technology, but the role is to provide infrastructure for others to build and deploy on. And I'm actually amazed by everything they end up doing with it.
There's the chat.
So that's really interesting. I think the examples that you laid out there are actually they're very helpful in making it clear, what we're talking about. We're talking about a broad set of technologies that might be coming from multiple different communities. And yeah, the LeafCloud one, where he talks about 50 plus different projects, is a great one. I think that ties into what Alice and Randall was saying. I think we've built some pretty good relationships with other foundations and the teams and staff at those. And you and I were recently talking with the LF and CNCF people. Yeah. And I think that it really is something that we should be thinking about this in an expansive and inclusive way.
Yeah. You are welcome.
You are welcome.
Every time Alice and Randall said that earlier, I was just like, oh.
You felt welcome.
I did. Like, whew.
So
wasn't sure.
We are just about at the end of the block for this time. Tomorrow we will have a second day of keynotes, and I've teased a couple of the sessions, but there are other.
There's a rumor there's a goat.
There is, yes.
I don't know if we can have a goat in the office here now that I've revealed our secret location.
Well, there's that. There's
I didn't get a livestock permit.
There's Volvo talking about their car platform. There are more Superuser nominees.
Self-driving car platform?
Yeah.
Designed and built with open source infrastructure software? Oh, did I give it away?
VexHost, another OpenStack public cloud, is going to be dropping some news live during the event. So
I love news.
Lots of stuff to come back for tomorrow. And I think that the thing that we are going to be doing is any of the sessions that were affected by the Summit app issues today, we will be rescheduling those. So watch your email. We'll communicate to all of the attendees over the email that you registered with. We want to make sure that everybody has a chance to watch those sessions and interact with the speakers. I think that the team is making progress on getting all of that back up. The Summit app itself is actually made up of a number of open source projects now that I think about it.
This is true.
Integration happening
so we're
in
doing,
real time.
We're doing live
we're doing
live deployments and code merging. Code has been merging this morning live to try to fix the issues. So as Jonathan said, any issues that were already affected, or any sessions rather that were already affected by the problems with the event platform, we will be rescheduling those.
There is one more forum session that's happening in about 20 minutes, I think, is when it's scheduled to start. And we're going to drop the link for that Etherpad and Zoom into the YouTube chat. And it'll also be on the IRC channel. There's an IRC channel for the summit. It's hashtag OpenInfra-Summit. So OpenInfra, all one word, -Summit, all lowercase, on Freenode. And so watch IRC, watch your email, and we'll send all of those links.
Yeah, so I was just getting a live update off camera there from about the Summit platform, and it does look like it's stabilizing. We think it's working now, but if there are sessions right after this or this afternoon that are impacted, we will reschedule those. We're hoping they're going to work because I think we've just pushed some code, but that's live, a live demo. People love a live demo. I didn't know the whole platform would be a live demo, but you never know. You never know when you're live.
So before we close, I wanted to make one thing that just kind of hit me as we were watching through the keynotes. You mentioned when we kicked off that we have people attending from over 120 different countries.
I know. That's unbelievable, and way more than we've ever had before.
And we've done some remote connections in keynotes before. I remember we pulled in someone from a Faraday cage doing a 5G demo.
That was
we
one
were
of my
in Berlin.
favorites. That was AT&T with
Airship.
Yeah, Airship.
But in this keynote this morning, we actually had presenters from who came from Asia, Europe, South America, North America. I don't think we've ever brought so many countries and regions together for our keynotes. That's pretty cool. And as you go through the sessions that are happening throughout this week, we have presenters from many countries as well. And so, some events to this virtual, or some benefits to this virtual event format.
Open infrastructure is for everyone, by everyone, regardless of country or company, and that's just something I personally believe very strongly in. And it's why I'm so excited to kick off another decade of open source work with this foundation and this community and all of you.
Yeah.
So I don't know, should we...
one more cheers?
Yeah, one more cheers.
Yeah,
so hope you have a good time with OpenInfra.
Yeah, have a good time with OpenInfra.
Send us your cheers.
We need to post ours on.